Sarah Jo here, and this tutorial is all about curves. You might think a curve is a curve, but you have to treat concave and convex curves differently. These are already sewn, but how you finish them can make or break your project. Starting with the concave curve, I'll show you what happens if you just turn it right side out with no treatment. I'm trying to press it, but the fabric just doesn't cooperate. Some of the wrinkles can be pressed out, but for the most part, you're only fighting the fabric and making things harder if you jump straight into turning things right side out. And that's honestly about as good as it gets without treating the seam allowance. To avoid that chaos, clip the curves. Use your scissors and cut from the raw edge to the seam allowance, being careful not to cut any of the stitching. Do this along the entire curved seam allowance. When I turn it right side out, you can already see how much better the fabric cooperates. Make sure to press it to set the seam in place. While clipping the curves adds an extra step, it still saves a lot of time and frustration by making the fabric so much simpler to manipulate. Now for the convex curve. This first one I'm not doing anything special to, I'm just turning it right side out and pressing it. You can see that the curve is not smooth. It's kind of choppy and jagged. To eliminate a bulky seam allowance and smooth out the curve, notch the edges of a curve by cutting out small triangles from the seam allowance. Start at the raw edge and cut towards the seam. Be careful not to cut through the seam. Once the curves are notched, flip the project right side out and use your fingers to adjust the seam to smooth it out. Use the iron to press the seam into place. You can see how much smoother the sample I notched is compared to the one I didn't do anything to. You can't really tell from the video, but the seam is also really bulky and feels lumpy compared to the one where I notched the edges. These are such simple steps to add to your next sewing project to elevate the quality. Let me know how it works for you in the comments. Happy sewing!